Today we explore the question, why are so many Americans unprepared for retirement? The answer isn't a mystery, it's history. One pivotal shift in the U.S. retirement system changed everything, and we're going to get into all the details. We'll do that right after this short message from our sponsor, Liberty Reverse.
Liberty Reverse wants to help you grow your reverse mortgage business with our proprietary Equity IQ product suite. Equity IQ gives your borrowers access to more funds, lowers their upfront costs, and expands eligibility for home purchases. Learn more at partners.libertyreversemortgage.com today. This ad is intended for mortgage professionals only and is not a consumer solicitation. PHH Mortgage, doing business as Liberty Reverse Mortgage, is an equal housing lender. NMLS number 2726.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining us. Why are so many Americans not prepared to retire? One major reason can be traced to a fundamental shift in just how Americans saved for their non-working years. Until the late 1970s, most large employers offered defined benefit pension plans. The employer would make nearly all of the contributions into what was a centrally managed pension fund. And the employee or worker typically did not have to contribute their own money. Now, in exchange, the worker did commit to a long tenure with that particular company, often 10 years or more, to be fully vested, and that earned them a right to a guaranteed stream of income in retirement, usually beginning at age 65. Now, these pension systems were not without risk. Before the passage of the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, or ERISA, workers had limited legal protection if a company went bankrupt or terminated its pension plan. High-profile failures such as Studebaker's collapse in 1963 highlighted the vulnerability of future benefits. Even so, the pension model delivered something that was critical: a predictable, lifelong income stream that allowed many Americans to retire with confidence. And company pension plans expanded steadily throughout the mid-20th century. In fact, they increased from roughly 25% of the workforce with a pension in 1950 to nearly half of private sector wage and salary workers by 1970. By the end of that decade, participation in employer-sponsored pension plans among full-time workers at medium and large firms was nearly universal. Can you believe that? But change was already underway. As the economy became a little bit more mobile and corporate cost pressures were intensifying, employer-sponsored pensions began to lose favor amongst large corporations, and industry groups such as the American Benefits Council and the Investment Company Institute heavily lobbied Congress. Now, they were arguing that traditional pensions were just too expensive. They were too complex to manage and were poorly suited for a workforce that no longer spent an entire career with just one employer. So what did they do? They promoted an alternative, a defined contribution plan, which was more portable, and it also shifted long-term investment risk from the employer onto the worker. Now, as a result, American workers now had to shoulder the full burden of saving for their retirement, and that is until many companies began to offer matching contributions for the 401k. Now, as is often the case in our nation's capital, corporate lobbying efforts ultimately prevailed. In 1978, the Revenue Act of 1978 introduced Section 401k to the IRS tax code, and that allowed employees to defer their compensation into tax-advantaged retirement accounts. While the 401k did offer flexibility and portability with any future employer that pensions lacked, it also marked a profound shift in responsibility. Retirement security was no longer largely guaranteed by a corporation or a large company employer. It became something that individual workers were expected to plan, fund, and manage on their own, year after year, through market cycles they could not control. And that's quite a bit. Now, beyond the shift away from pensions, retirement savings itself became optional, and that's a key point. Unlike countries such as Australia, where employers are required to contribute to a mandatory superannuitation system, here in the United States, we rely largely on voluntary participation. For many workers, consistent contributions were not realistic during lower income years or periods of increasing expenses, and for others, saving was postponed with the assumption that they'll catch up in later years. And at the same time, inflation, it did more damage than expected. The high inflation era of the 1970s and early 80s delivered the first major blow to fixed retirement incomes, and also a false sense of security later set in the decades that followed as inflation remained mostly subdued. However, that illusion faded in the years following the COVID-19 pandemic. In just 4 short years, prices for housing, healthcare, and insurance and everyday goods increased by an average of 24%. However, even moderate inflation over time will steadily erode purchasing power in the years that are leading up to and during retirement. And consequently, today's retirees, they're now feeling that financial squeeze acutely because their incomes are often fixed while their expenses are not. And compounding this issue is that consumer debt is now following many retirees, if not most, into retirement. Credit cards, auto loans, mortgages, and medical bills don't disappear at age 65. They're now becoming an ongoing monthly obligation, limiting flexibility and increasing stress. And then you add longer life expectancies, increasing healthcare costs, and volatile markets. Well, you can do the math quickly, and you can see that it's quite unforgiving. The result is this: many retirees didn't fail. They were handed a system that demanded more responsibility, more risk, and more precision than any generation that came before them. And when savings do fall short, the gap is being increasingly filled by the one asset that has been quietly becoming central to retirement security. Yes, the home. Despite this, Fannie Mae research reveals that only 15% of homeowners 60 and older say that they would consider tapping into their home's equity for additional funds that are needed during retirement. However, when financial reality finally does rear its head, many retirees come to realize that their home equity is that one lever they still have to boost their retirement cash flow. Today's episode isn't about redefining who should or shouldn't use any particular financial tool, and it's not about shifting our focus as an industry squarely onto the traditional needs-based borrower. It's about understanding how retirees got here. Now, if we do want to have an honest discussion about the American retirement security and its failures in this country, it should begin with acknowledging these big and structural changes, not blaming individuals and not oversimplifying the problem. In that context, it really matters for policymakers, financial professionals, and also for anyone that is trying to navigate retirement in today's economic reality. What are your thoughts? You can leave those in the comment section below. And also, if you would consider sharing today's video on your LinkedIn network, we thank you for that. Don't forget, we have a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to and hit the notification bell. That way, you know anytime we have a latest episode for you to view. Do you need to catch up on the latest reverse mortgage news? No worries, we got you covered in our weekly podcast, Heck'em World Weekly. We have both a video and audio edition. Listeners can listen and subscribe on Apple Music and Spotify. Thanks so much for joining us, and be sure to return next Monday for more reverse mortgage news, commentary, and analysis you only find, yes, right here at Heck'em World. Have a great week.